The Grand Hall of the Galactic Council stretched endlessly upward, its crystalline walls reflecting the light of 1,000 distant stars. Among the towering figures of various alien species, Princess Hannah moved with practiced grace, her tiny form barely visible to most. At just 15 centimeters tall, she navigated carefully through the forest of giant legs and hovering platforms, her advanced gravity suit allowing her to float safely at eye level with the larger species. Being a stellar miniature had never bothered Hannah on her home planet of Minamara. There, everyone was her size, and life was perfectly scaled to their needs. But here, in the wider galaxy, everything seemed designed to remind her of her physical insignificance. Today marked her 100th appearance before the Council, where she would once again present her credentials as a potential diplomatic liaison. The council chamber buzzed with the usual mix of languages and electronic translations, but Hannah had learned to distinguish the subtle undertones of dismissal in any language. "The representative from Minamara may now approach," announced the council head, a massive purple-skinned being whose single eye barely flickered in Hannah's direction. She guided her platform forward, her long silver dress shimmering in the artificial light. The traditional garments of her people were woven from starlight-catching threads, making them visible even to the largest species. Her dark hair was braided with similar materials, creating a gentle glow around her face. "Honorable Council," Hannah began, her voice amplified by her suit's systems, "I come before you again to discuss the matter of Minamaran representation in galactic affairs." A rumble of barely concealed laughter rippled through the chamber. From her position, Hannah could see several council members exchanging knowing looks. She had seen those same expressions countless times before. "Princess Hannah," spoke Councillor Tak, a giant beetle-like being whose mandibles clicked with each word, "while we respect the Minamaran people, surely you understand the practical difficulties of your participation in major diplomatic functions." Hannah maintained her composure, though her hands tightened slightly on the controls of her platform. "Our size has never limited our abilities, Counselor. Minamaran technology has allowed us to interact effectively with all species. We have developed solutions for every physical challenge." "Yes, yes," interrupted another council member. "This one a floating gas cloud contained within an environmental suit. But consider the simple matter of formal dinners. How would you even sit at the table?" More laughter followed, and Hannah felt her cheeks burn. She had prepared for this meeting for weeks, assembled detailed presentations about Minamaran achievements, gathered evidence of their technological capabilities. Yet here they were, once again, reduced to discussing dinner seating arrangements. "We have designed adaptable dining platforms," she continued steadily. "Our engineers have solved far more complex problems than shared meals. The Minamaran people have contributed significantly to microtechnology and precision engineering throughout the galaxy." "Indeed," said the council head, in a tone that suggested the conversation was already over. "We will take your petition under advisement. As always, perhaps when you have found a suitable mate from a more substantial species, we might reconsider your position." The dismissal stung more than usual. It wasn't enough that they rejected her diplomatic credentials. They had to remind her of her personal failures as well. In the 5 years since reaching marriage age, Hannah had faced rejection from every eligible noble across the galaxy. No one wanted a wife they might accidentally step on. As she guided her platform away from the council chamber, Hannah caught snippets of conversation from the departing members. Back in her private quarters aboard the Minamaran embassy ship, Hannah finally allowed herself to show her frustration. She deactivated her gravity suit and dropped onto her perfectly sized bed, letting out a long sigh that stirred the miniature curtains. "Another productive day?" asked her attendant, Mina, who had been watching the proceedings through their ship's communication system. "About as productive as trying to teach a gas giant to dance," Hannah replied, staring up at the ceiling decorated with microscopic stars. "They still see us as nothing more than clever pets." Mina sat beside her, adjusting her own formal robes. "The Council's prejudice doesn't define us, Your Highness. Our achievements speak for themselves." "Do they?" Hannah sat up, running her fingers through her now dulled hair. We've developed some of the most advanced technology in the galaxy. Our quantum engineering is unmatched. We've solved problems other species couldn't even identify. Yet all they see is our size. She walked to the window of her quarters, looking out at the massive space station that housed the Galactic Council. From here, even the largest ships looked small against the backdrop of space. Sometimes I wonder if my parents were wrong to send me here. Maybe we should just stay on Minamara, build our own civilization without concerning ourselves with the rest of the galaxy. You don't mean that, Mana said softly. You're the one who always says we have so much to offer, so much to learn from other species. Hannah smiled despite herself. You're right, of course. It's just exhausting. Being constantly overlooked, both figuratively and literally, having to prove our worth over and over again. A gentle chime interrupted their conversation. Dinner was being served in the embassy's dining hall. As they made their way through the miniature corridors of their section of the ship, Hannah's mind wandered to the council member's dismissive comment about finding a mate. The truth was, she had tried. She had attended countless diplomatic functions, met nobles and leaders from hundreds of worlds. Some had been polite, others condescending, but all had ultimately seen her size as an insurmountable barrier. Even the few who had shown genuine interest in Minamaran culture couldn't imagine a real relationship with someone they needed magnification tools to see clearly. That night, as she prepared for sleep, Hannah stood before her mirror, looking at her reflection. By Minamaran standards, she was considered quite beautiful, graceful features, bright eyes, and the royal family's characteristic silvery hair. But in the greater galaxy, she was barely noticeable. Tomorrow will be different, she told her reflection, not quite believing it. Tomorrow, someone will finally see me for who I am, not how tall I stand. She couldn't know then how right she would be, or that the next day would bring an encounter that would change not only her life, but the entire galaxy's perception of the stellar miniatures. As she drifted off to sleep, the stars outside her window twinkled, as if they alone knew the remarkable turn her story was about to take. The morning light of 3 suns filtered through the massive windows of the Galactic Science Center, casting rainbow patterns across the polished floors. Daho adjusted his researcher's uniform, double-checking the translator module pinned to his collar. As Earth's leading xenobiologist, he had attended countless conferences, but today's summit on interspecies genetics promised to be particularly fascinating. He made his way through the crowded hallways, nodding to various alien scientists he had worked with before. The diversity of life forms never ceased to amaze him. Floating gas creatures, crystalline beings that sparkled as they moved, and even species that existed partly in other dimensions. Yet something caught his eye that he had never seen before. A tiny platform hovering at shoulder height, carrying what appeared to be a miniature person. The small figure was directing her platform with remarkable precision through the crowd, consulting what looked like a holographic display. Daho found himself following, intrigued by the technology that allowed such a small being to navigate safely among giants. He had heard of the stellar miniatures, but had never had the opportunity to meet one. His chance came sooner than expected when the tiny platform suddenly sparked and began to drift erratically. Without thinking, Daho stepped forward, carefully catching the device in his cupped hands before it could crash into a passing delegate. "Are you all right?" he asked, activating his translator. The small figure stood up from where she had braced herself against the platform's railing. "Yes, thank you," she replied, her voice clear through his translator. "Just a minor malfunction in the gravity stabilizers." She looked up at him, and Daho was struck by the intelligence in her eyes. "I'm Daho Kim, Earth's representative to the Genetic Summit." He introduced himself, carefully keeping his hand steady. "Princess Hannah of Minamara," she replied with a small bow. "Would you mind holding the platform steady while I reset the stabilizers? It should only take a moment." Daho watched, fascinated, as her tiny hands moved with incredible precision over what must have been microscopic controls. "The engineering is remarkable," he commented. The power source must be incredibly efficient to maintain stable anti-gravity at this scale. Hannah looked up in surprise, her hands pausing in their work. You understand miniature engineering. Only theoretically, he admitted. But I've studied the principles. Your people's achievements in quantum mechanics are unparalleled. I've always wanted to learn more about Minimaran technology. The platform hummed back to life, but instead of immediately moving away, Hannah remained where she was. You're the first person I've met at one of these functions who's shown any real interest in our technological capabilities. Most people just want to know if I'm afraid of being stepped on. Daeho laughed. Well, with technology like this, I imagine that's hardly a concern. Though I am curious about how you've solved the energy density problem for such small-scale power systems. Their conversation continued as they made their way to the main conference hall, Daeho asking thoughtful questions about Minimaran science, while Hannah shared insights into her people's technological achievements. She found herself increasingly impressed by his genuine interest and respect for her culture. The conference hall was arranged in tiered seating, with special accommodation areas for various species. Hannah's platform was designed to dock with a designated small-scale section, but she hesitated when Daeho headed toward the Earth delegation's area. Would you like to continue our discussion? She asked, trying to keep her voice casual. There's an adapter that would allow my platform to dock with your section's interface. Daeho smiled warmly. I'd like that very much. To be honest, I find your insights far more interesting than another lecture on macro-species genetic compatibility. As they settled in for the conference, Hannah noticed the strange looks they received from other delegates. She was used to being stared at, but this felt different. For once, she wasn't being treated as a curiosity or a pet. She was engaged in a real scientific discussion with someone who saw her as an equal. The morning's presentations began, but Hannah found herself frequently distracted by whispered exchanges with Daeho. He would point out interesting correlations between the speaker's findings and Minimaran biology, while she shared observations about genetic engineering at the microscale level. During a break in the proceedings, Daeho turned to her with enthusiasm. Your people's understanding of genetic manipulation at the quantum level could revolutionize our approach to species adaptation. Have you considered presenting your research at one of these summits? Hannah's expression fell slightly. We've tried. The committee, they don't typically approve presentations from stellar miniatures. They claim our research scale is too specialized to be relevant to larger species. Daeho frowned. That's ridiculous. The principles you've developed could be scaled up for application in any size range. This is exactly the kind of breakthrough thinking the scientific community needs. As they continued talking, neither noticed the growing attention they were attracting. Other delegates were whispering among themselves, pointing at the unusual pair, the human scientist and the tiny princess, deep in scientific discussion. The afternoon session was about to begin when Daeho made an impulsive decision. Princess Hannah, would you be interested in collaborating on a research project? I believe combining our perspectives could lead to some groundbreaking discoveries. Hannah stared at him, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. You want to work with me? With a stellar miniature? I want to work with a brilliant scientist who happens to be a stellar miniature, he corrected gently. Your size has nothing to do with your capabilities. If anything, it gives you a unique perspective that could be invaluable. For the first time in her many visits to the Galactic Science Center, Hannah felt truly seen. Not as a curiosity, not as a primitive being to be patronized, but as a scientist and an equal. She found herself blinking back tears as she replied, I would be honored, Dr. Kim. The rest of the day passed in a blur of excited discussions and shared ideas. When the conference finally ended, Daeho and Hannah had already outlined several potential research projects and exchanged contact information. As Hannah prepared to return to the Minimaran embassy ship, she paused. Thank you, she said softly, for seeing me as a person, not just a tiny creature to be wondered at. Daeho's expression was serious as he replied, Anyone who can't see past physical differences to recognize intelligence and capability is missing out on the true wonders of our galaxy. I look forward to working with you, Princess Hannah." As she guided her platform back through the now empty halls, Hannah felt a warmth in her chest she hadn't experienced before. For the first time since leaving Minamara, she felt truly hopeful about her future in the greater galaxy. Sometimes, she realized, it took just one person willing to look closer to change everything. Little did either of them know that this chance meeting would lead to far more than scientific collaboration. It would challenge the galaxy's preconceptions, spark a revolution in interspecies relations, and prove that the heart's ability to recognize worth transcends all physical boundaries. The news spread through the Galactic Science Center like wildfire. A human scientist and a stellar miniature princess were collaborating on groundbreaking research. Over the following weeks, Daho and Hannah's partnership became the subject of intense speculation and curiosity. Their daily meetings in the research labs drew stares and whispers from beings of all species. Hannah guided her platform through the specially modified entrance of the new joint laboratory they had set up. The space was a marvel of adaptive engineering, with areas scaled for both her size and Daho's. Their workstations sat side by side. His a standard research terminal, hers a precisely crafted miniature version that interfaced seamlessly with the main systems. "I think we've made a breakthrough with the quantum interface," Hannah called out as she adjusted her gravity suit's settings. The suit was her people's greatest achievement, a marvel of engineering that allowed stellar miniatures to interact safely with larger species. Today, she was wearing their latest prototype, designed specifically for scientific work. Daho looked up from his terminal, his eyes bright with interest. Over the past weeks, he had learned to focus naturally on her tiny form, no longer needing the magnification aids that most species relied on. "Show me," he said, moving closer to her workstation. Hannah activated a holographic display that filled the space between them. Intricate patterns of energy and matter danced in the air, showing the results of their latest experiments. "See here. The quantum field responds differently when we adjust for relative scale. It's not just about size, it's about perspective." Their research had started as a simple collaboration, but had quickly evolved into something revolutionary. They were discovering that the universe itself behaved differently at various scales, and the stellar miniature's unique perspective offered insights that larger species had never considered. As they worked, Hannah found herself increasingly aware of how comfortable she felt in Daho's presence. He never made her feel small or insignificant. When she spoke, he listened with genuine interest, often building on her ideas with insights from his own experience. "Your people's understanding of quantum mechanics is incredible," Daho remarked, studying the data scrolling across his screen. "I've been thinking, we should present these findings at the next Galactic Science Summit." Hannah's heart skipped a beat. The summit, but they've never accepted a stellar miniature presentation before. "They've never seen research like this before," Daho countered. "And they've never had a joint presentation from a human and a Minamaran. We'll submit it together." Before Hannah could respond, an alert chimed through the lab. The daily news feed was reporting on their research, and not in a positive way. The holographic headlines hovered in the air. "Controversial partnership raises concerns," and human scientists' judgment questioned over miniature collaboration. Daho's face darkened as he read the reports. Critics were suggesting that he was wasting his time, that no meaningful science could come from working with a species so small. Some even hinted that the partnership was damaging Earth's scientific reputation. "Don't let it bother you," Hannah said quietly, though her own heart felt heavy. "I'm used to this kind of response." "Well, I'm not," Daho replied firmly. "And I won't accept it. Our research speaks for itself." He began typing rapidly at his terminal, pulling up their latest results. "We're going to compile everything we've discovered so far. Let them try to dismiss this evidence." They worked late into the night, organizing their findings and preparing their presentation for the summit. As they worked, Hannah shared stories about growing up on Minamara, about the challenges her people faced in being taken seriously by the larger galaxy. Daho listened, sometimes asking questions, sometimes just offering quiet support. "You know," he said during a break, "I've been reading about Minamaran culture. Your people have achieved so much, developed technologies that other species can barely comprehend. Why does the galaxy insist on ignoring all of that?" Hannah's platform hovered near his shoulder as she considered the question. Fear, maybe, or just the comfort of believing that bigger means better. It's easier than accepting that the universe is more complex than that. Their conversation was interrupted by an urgent message from the Minamaran embassy. The Council of Elders had heard about their research, and they were concerned. Collaboration with larger species was acceptable, but this partnership was becoming too close, too personal. "They're worried about protecting our technological secrets," Hannah explained, her voice tight with frustration. "They've been hurt by other species before, treated as curiosities or resources to be exploited." Daho was quiet for a moment, then asked, "What do you want, Hannah? Not what the council wants, or what the galaxy expects. What do you want?" It was a question no one had ever asked her before. Hannah looked around their shared lab, at the work they'd accomplished together, at the man who had become not just a colleague, but a friend who saw her true worth. "I want to change things," she said finally. "I want to prove that size doesn't determine value, that different perspectives make us stronger, not weaker. I want to break down these barriers that keep species apart." Daho smiled. "Then that's what we'll do. Starting with this research, this presentation, we'll show them what's possible when we work together." As if the universe was listening, another alert chimed. Their application to present at the summit had been accepted. It would be the first time a stellar miniature would address the galaxy's leading scientists as an equal. That evening, as Hannah prepared to return to her quarters, she paused at the lab entrance. "Thank you," she said, "for being willing to face all this criticism and pressure just to work with me." "I'm not just working with you," Daho replied. "I'm working with the most brilliant scientist I've ever met. Everything else is just noise." As her platform carried her through the corridors, Hannah realized something was changing, not just in how others saw her, but in how she saw herself. For the first time, she wasn't fighting to prove her worth alone. She had found someone who already saw it, who fought alongside her not out of pity or obligation, but out of genuine respect and friendship. And perhaps, though she barely dared to admit it even to herself, something more was growing between them, something that transcended physical size and species barriers, something that made her heart flutter whenever he smiled at her. But that was a barrier for another day's breaking. For now, they had a presentation to prepare, a galaxy to convince, and barriers to break down. And with each passing day, more people were beginning to see what Daho had seen from the start, that the size of one's body had nothing to do with the size of one's mind, heart, or potential. The Galactic Science Center's emergency alarms blared without warning, their piercing sound cutting through the quiet afternoon. Hannah's platform automatically stabilized as the massive structure trembled. Through the vast windows, she could see the strange, rippling distortion in space that marked the approach of an ion storm, the largest one recorded in centuries. Daho burst into their lab, his usually calm face tight with concern. "The storm's headed straight for the primary power grid. If it hits, we'll lose the containment fields on half the station's research facilities." Hannah was already accessing the emergency protocols through her terminal. "The standard shields won't hold against an ion storm this size. They're evacuating the upper levels now." Around them, chaos erupted as scientists rushed to secure dangerous experiments and protect valuable research data. The station's massive corridors filled with beings of all sizes fleeing toward the emergency shelters. But Hannah remained at her station, her tiny fingers flying over the controls as she studied the approaching storm. "Something's not right," she muttered, enhancing the sensor readings. "The ion patterns, they're not random. This storm is being guided." Daho leaned in closer, squinting at the microscopic displays. Guided? By what? Not what. Who? Hannah's voice was grim. Someone's using quantum resonance technology to direct the storm. Technology that looks very similar to Minimaran designs. The implications hit them both at the same time. Only the stellar miniatures had mastered quantum manipulation at this level. If someone had stolen their technology, had found a way to weaponize it. We need to get to the control center, Daho said, already moving toward the door. They need to know what they're really dealing with. Hannah guided her platform alongside him as they raced through the increasingly empty corridors. The few remaining beings they passed stared at the odd pair, the human scientist running alongside a tiny hovering platform carrying a Minimaran princess. The control center was in chaos when they arrived. Giant view screens showed the approaching storm, its purple-black mass now clearly visible to the naked eye. Station officials argued over evacuation protocols while technicians frantically tried to boost shield power. Listen to me. Hannah's amplified voice cut through the noise. This isn't a natural phenomenon. The storm is being controlled using modified Minimaran technology. The station's chief administrator, a tall crystalline being, turned toward them. Controlled? Impossible. And how would a small one like you know this? Because we've been studying quantum field manipulation for months, Daho interrupted, stepping forward. Princess Hannah is the leading expert on this technology. If she says the storm is being controlled, you need to listen. The station shuddered again, more violently this time. Warning lights flashed as the outer shields began to fail. The administrator looked from the screens to Hannah, desperation finally overcoming prejudice. What can we do? Hannah's mind raced through possibilities. We need to disrupt the quantum signal that's guiding the storm. But to do that, she paused, knowing what she had to suggest. We need to send someone into the maintenance tunnels to modify the station's sensor array. The maintenance tunnels. The administrator's crystalline form flickered with alarm. They're far too small for any of our repair crews to access. Too small for you, Hannah said quietly. Not for me. Daho turned to her sharply. Hannah, no. The radiation levels in those tunnels during a storm will be manageable with my suit's shielding, she finished. I'm the only one who can do this. You know I am. The station rocked with another impact. Systems began failing across multiple sectors. They were running out of time. Daho looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. I'll guide you from here. The sensor controls should be accessible through the auxiliary systems. The administrator began to object, but another violent shake of the station silenced any protests. Do it, they ordered. Whatever you need. Hannah's platform shot through the narrow access shaft that led to the maintenance tunnels. Here, everything was scaled closer to her size. Narrow corridors designed for repair drones, now barely functioning as the storm's influence grew stronger. The quantum signature is getting clearer, she reported through her suit's communicator. Someone definitely modified our technology. But why target the science center? The research data. Daho's voice crackled through the static. Think about it. Every major scientific breakthrough from 100 worlds, all stored here, including our work on quantum manipulation. Hannah's hands tightened on her controls. Someone was trying to steal their research, to gain control of technology they couldn't understand. And in doing so, they were threatening countless lives. She reached the sensor array control node, immediately seeing the problem. The quantum receivers were completely misaligned, unable to detect the artificial nature of the storm. With practiced precision, she began to modify the settings, her tiny fingers making adjustments that would have been impossible for larger beings. Radiation levels are spiking, Daho warned. Hannah, you need to hurry. Almost there, she replied, fighting to keep her platform steady as the station shook around her. Just need to. There. The modified sensors came online, immediately detecting and analyzing the storm's control signal. In the control center, Daho watched as new data flooded the screens. It's working, he called out, We're tracing the signal back to a ship hiding in the outer rim. They're using stolen Minimaran tech to try to breach our databases. The administrator quickly ordered defensive measures, now that they knew what they were fighting. But Hana wasn't finished. "I can do more than trace it," she said, her fingers still moving across the controls. "I can reverse the signal. Send their own storm right back at them." Warning alerts flashed on her suit's display as radiation levels continued to rise. But Hana kept working, using her people's own technology to protect the station. Within moments, the storm began to change direction, turning back toward its source. Through the station's sensors, they watched as the hidden ship fled, their attack thwarted by the very technology they had tried to steal. The storm dissipated harmlessly in space, leaving the station damaged but intact. When Hana finally emerged from the maintenance tunnels, she found the control center's atmosphere completely changed. The beings who had dismissed her hours ago now looked at her with new respect. The administrator apologized formally for their earlier skepticism. But Hana was looking only at Daho, who waited anxiously by the exit. "I told you Minimaran technology could be useful on a larger scale," she said with a small smile. He laughed, relief clear in his voice. "I never doubted it. Or you." Then, more seriously, "How are you feeling?" "The radiation exposure. My suit protected me," she assured him, "though I might need to sleep for a day or two." As they left the control center, word of what had happened was already spreading through the station. The stellar miniature princess who had saved them all, who had proven that size meant nothing when it came to courage and capability. But more importantly, someone had tried to steal and weaponize Minimaran technology. The galaxy could no longer ignore the achievements of the stellar miniatures, nor dismiss them as insignificant. Change was coming, whether they were ready or not. And Hana, floating beside Daho as they made their way back to their lab, knew that she would be at the forefront of that change. Today had proven what she had always believed, that the smallest beings could make the biggest difference. The Grand Council chamber hummed with tension as Daho stood before the assembled representatives of 100 worlds. News of his relationship with Princess Hana had spread far beyond the Science Center, and not everyone was pleased. The massive chamber, usually reserved for matters of galactic importance, now focused on what many saw as an impossible union. Elder Jun, a respected diplomat from the Stellar Alliance, rose from his seat. His voice echoed through the chamber as he spoke. "The Council has gathered today to address the matter of the human scientist Daho and his association with Princess Hana of Minimara. Such a union is unprecedented and raises serious concerns." Hana's platform hovered beside Daho, her tiny form straight and proud despite the countless eyes upon them. After saving the Science Center from the ion storm, she had earned some respect. But this was different. This was personal. According to ancient galactic law, Elder Jun continued, any union between species must be proven viable through the traditional trials. If the human wishes to court a Minimaran princess, he must face these challenges. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. The traditional trials hadn't been invoked in centuries. They were designed to test compatibility between species, but no one had ever attempted them with such a dramatic size difference between partners. "I accept the challenge," Daho said firmly, his voice carrying clearly through the vast space. Several council members shifted uncomfortably. They hadn't expected him to agree so readily. Hana touched his arm gently with her tiny hand. "The trials are dangerous, Daho. They weren't designed for this kind of situation." "Then it's time they were updated," he replied quietly. "We've proven that size doesn't matter in science or courage. Now we'll prove it doesn't matter in love either." Elder Jun stepped forward, his ceremonial robes sweeping the floor. "The trials will test 3 aspects: mind, spirit, and heart. You must pass all 3 to earn the right to court Princess Hana." The first trial chamber was a vast room filled with shifting holograms and complex mathematical patterns. Daho stood at its center while Hana watched from a special observation platform. "The trial of mind," announced Elder Jun, tests your ability to understand and appreciate your partner's perspective of the universe. You must solve these puzzles as a Minimoran would. The challenge began. Holographic representations of quantum mechanics problems appeared around Dao, the kind of calculations that Minimarans dealt with daily. But these weren't just any problems. They required understanding how the universe appeared from their tiny scale. Dao closed his eyes, remembering all the hours spent working with Hana, learning to see things from her perspective. When he opened them, he began working through the puzzles with a different mindset. "Remarkable," whispered one of the council members as Dao solved problem after problem. "He thinks like one of them." The second trial took place in a chamber designed to test physical compatibility. The challenge seemed impossible. Dao had to manipulate objects at the Minimoran scale while protecting them from damage. "The trial of spirit," Elder Jun explained, "proves you can exist in harmony with your partner's world without destroying it." Using specially designed quantum interface gloves, Dao carefully moved through a series of increasingly difficult tasks. His hands shook slightly as he handled objects smaller than dust to human eyes, but months of working with Minimoran technology had taught him extraordinary precision. Hana watched, her heart racing, as he completed each task with careful determination. She had never seen anyone of his size show such delicate control, such respect for the tiny world her people inhabited. The final trial was the most difficult. The trial of heart took place in a chamber that seemed to shift and change around them, creating scenarios that tested their ability to communicate and connect across their physical differences. "Love must transcend all barriers," Elder Jun intoned. "Prove that your hearts can truly meet despite the gulf between your worlds." The chamber created illusions of danger and disaster, forcing Dao and Hana to work together to survive. They had to trust each other completely, coordinating their actions when they could barely exist in the same physical space. But what the council hadn't expected was how naturally they worked together. Months of collaboration in the lab had taught them to communicate without words, to understand each other's strengths and limitations. When Hana's platform malfunctioned in one scenario, Dao caught her without hesitation, his hands forming a safe haven. When he became trapped in another, she used her small size to reach controls that would have been impossible for him to access. The watching council members began to whisper among themselves. This wasn't just a display of compatibility. It was a demonstration of something they had never considered possible. As the final trial ended, Elder Jun stepped forward again. His expression was thoughtful as he announced, "The council has witnessed something unprecedented today. The trials were designed to prove compatibility between species, but you have shown us something more. You have demonstrated that true understanding transcends physical form." Dao and Hana stood together before the council, her platform at the level of his heart. The chamber was silent as Elder Jun continued. "The traditional trials are past, but more importantly, you have challenged our understanding of what is possible between species. Perhaps it is we who have failed a test today, the test of seeing beyond our preconceptions." The announcement sent ripples through the gathered diplomats. Some nodded in approval, while others seemed uncomfortable with the implications. But for Dao and Hana, the council's reaction hardly mattered. "You didn't have to do this," Hana said softly as they left the chamber. "Face the trials, I mean. We could have found another way." Dao smiled down at her. "Yes, I did. Not just for us, but for everyone who's ever been told that being different means being less. You taught me that size doesn't determine worth. Today, we taught it to the galaxy." As they moved through the corridors together, other beings stepped aside, watching with new eyes. The human scientist and the tiny princess had done more than pass some ancient trials. They had begun to change how the galaxy saw itself. But their greatest challenges still lay ahead. The trials were just the beginning of their journey together, a journey that would continue to challenge prejudices and reshape possibilities. For now, though, they had won the right to face those challenges together, and that was enough. The morning light filtered through the crystalline walls of Daho's new laboratory aboard the Minimoran diplomatic vessel. It had been 2 months since he passed the traditional trials, and now he faced an even greater challenge, adapting to life among the stellar miniatures. The lab itself was a testament to human ingenuity, a unique blend of human and Minimaran technology that allowed him to work seamlessly with beings a fraction of his size. Today, he stood carefully adjusting a quantum interface device of his own design. The machine would allow him to manipulate objects at the Minimaran scale without risking damage to their delicate equipment. Hannah watched from her platform, her expression a mixture of pride and amusement. "You know," she said, guiding her platform closer to his workstation, "when my parents agreed to let you establish a lab here, I don't think they expected you to redesign our entire approach to cross-species interaction." Daeho smiled as he made a final adjustment. "Your people have amazing technology, but it was all designed from your perspective. I just thought about how to bridge the gap from both sides." His latest invention was already drawing attention from both human and Minimaran scientists. The quantum interface allowed beings of any size to work together, sharing space and tools without risk to either party. It was just one of many innovations he had developed since moving to the Minimaran vessel. A soft chime announced the arrival of the Minimaran Science Council. The door rised open, revealing a group of tiny figures on their floating platforms. Among them was Master Jin, the head of Minimaran Research and Development, who had been one of the strongest opponents of Daeho's presence on their ship. "We've come to evaluate your progress," Master Jin announced, his tiny voice amplified by his platform's systems. "The Council remains skeptical about sharing our technology with outsiders." Daeho nodded respectfully. "I understand your concerns. Perhaps a demonstration would help." He activated the quantum interface, and the air between them shimmered with possibility. What followed was a display of human adaptability that left even the skeptical council members speechless. Daeho showed how his modifications to Minimaran technology allowed for seamless cooperation between species of vastly different sizes. He demonstrated tools that could switch between scales instantly, communication systems that translated not just language but perspective, and safety protocols that protected both parties. "But the most important innovation," he said, reaching for a small device on his workbench, "is this." He activated it, and suddenly the council members could see their own world from his perspective, while he could see from theirs. The quantum viewer he had developed allowed beings to literally see through each other's eyes. Master Jin's platform moved closer, his scientific curiosity overcoming his prejudice. "This is remarkable. You've taken our basic principles of quantum manipulation and applied them in ways we never considered." "Because you never needed to," Hana interjected. "You developed your technology for your own scale." Daeho's human perspective allowed him to see new possibilities. The demonstration continued, showing how human ingenuity combined with Minimaran precision could solve problems that had long plagued both species. Daeho had even developed a way to make Minimaran cities accessible to larger species without risking damage to their delicate structures. As the council members talked among themselves, Hana guided her platform to Daeho's shoulder level. "You're changing how they see humans," she said softly, "not just as allies, but as equals who can offer new perspectives." Before Daeho could respond, an alarm blared through the ship. Red warning lights flashed as the vessel's quantum sensors detected an approaching threat. The same pirates who had tried to steal Minimaran technology at the Science Center had returned, and this time they had brought reinforcements. "All defensive systems online," announced the ship's eye. "But the pirates are using modified quantum disruptors. Our shields may not hold." This was the moment Daeho had been preparing for. "Master Jin," he called out, "I need your authorization to activate the hybrid defense system." The council leader hesitated only briefly before nodding. Daeho's fingers flew over his controls, activating a defense grid that combined human tactical thinking with Minimaran quantum technology. The pirates had expected to face traditional Minimaran defenses. They weren't prepared for this hybrid approach. Together, Daeho and the Minimaran crew coordinated their defense. His modifications allowed them to work as one unit, despite their size differences. The pirates' weapons, designed to break through quantum shields, were useless against defenses that operated on multiple scales simultaneously. Within minutes, the attack was repelled. The pirate ships retreated, leaving the Minamaran vessel unscathed. Master Jin turned to Daho, his tiny features showing newfound respect. "We owe you an apology," the council leader said. "We were so focused on protecting our technology that we failed to see the value of combining our knowledge with others." Daho shook his head. "No apology needed. Change is never easy, especially when protecting something precious. But sometimes the best way to protect knowledge is to share it with those who can help it grow." The council departed, leaving Daho and Hannah alone in the lab. She looked at him with pride. "You've done more than create new technology," she said. "You've shown them that different doesn't mean incompatible, that sometimes the biggest innovations come from the unlikeliest partnerships." Daho smiled as he carefully adjusted her platform's hover height. "I learned it from you. You showed me that size doesn't limit possibility. It just requires looking at problems from a new perspective." As they turned back to their work, both knew that this was just the beginning. Human ingenuity combined with Minamaran precision would continue to break down barriers and create new possibilities. Together, they were proving that the greatest challenges could be overcome when different perspectives united toward a common goal. The lab hummed with potential as they continued their work, two beings of vastly different sizes working in perfect harmony. Their relationship had started as an unlikely partnership, but it had grown into something that was changing the galaxy's understanding of what was possible when prejudice gave way to possibility. The Galactic Council chamber glowed with the light of 1,000 stars as delegates from across the galaxy gathered for an unprecedented event. Today marked the first marriage between a human and a stellar miniature, but it represented something far greater than a simple union. It was the dawn of a new era in galactic relations. Daho stood at the center of the chamber, wearing a formal suit modified with Minamaran quantum technology that allowed him to interact safely with his tiny bride. Beside him, Hannah's platform hovered at heart level, her silver dress catching the starlight and making her glow like a living constellation. "Never in our history," Elder Jun began, his voice carrying through the vast space, "have we witnessed such a union. What began as an unlikely partnership has grown into something that has changed our understanding of what is possible." The gathered delegates represented every known species in the galaxy. Many had opposed this marriage at first, claiming it was impossible, unnatural, even dangerous. But over the past year, Daho and Hannah had proved them all wrong. Their collaborative research had revolutionized interspecies relations. The quantum interface technology they developed had spread throughout the galaxy, allowing beings of all sizes to work and live together in ways previously thought impossible. But more importantly, their love had shown that hearts could meet across any distance, any difference. "The bridge you have built," Elder Jun continued, "extends far beyond your two species. You have shown us that size, form, and origin need not divide us, that the universe is vast enough for all kinds of love." As part of the ceremony, holographic displays showed their journey together. Their first meeting at the Science Center, their collaboration during the Ion Storm crisis, Daho's completion of the traditional trials, and their countless innovations that had changed galactic society. Hannah looked up at Daho, her tiny features bright with joy. "When I first met you," she said, her voice carried clearly through their quantum communication link, "I thought I had found someone who could see past my size. Instead, I found someone who showed the entire galaxy how to see differently." Daho smiled, carefully extending his hand near her platform. Through their quantum interface, she could feel the warmth of his touch as if they were the same size. "You taught me that the heart doesn't measure love in centimeters," he replied. "It measures it in moments of understanding, in shared dreams, in the courage to believe in impossible things." The ceremony incorporated traditions from both their cultures, adapted to bridge their physical differences. When it came time to exchange rings, Daho's was a quantum-linked band that would allow him to always sense Hannah's presence, while hers was a tiny masterpiece of human and Minamaran craftsmanship. As Elder Jun pronounced them united, the chamber erupted in celebration. But the real triumph wasn't just their marriage. It was what it represented. Across the galaxy, their example had inspired others to look past physical differences, to see the potential in unlikely partnerships. The Minamaran embassy ship had become a center for interspecies cooperation, with beings of all sizes working together using the tools and techniques Daho and Hannah had developed. Their research had expanded into new fields, exploring ways to make the galaxy more accessible to all species. At the celebration following the ceremony, delegates from various worlds approached to share how the couple's work had impacted their societies. A massive gas giant being described how they could now interact safely with solid-form species. A crystalline entity explained how quantum interface technology had allowed them to communicate with organic beings in new ways. "You see," Hannah said to Daho as they watched the diverse crowd, "we did more than prove love knows no size. We showed them that diversity makes us stronger, not weaker." Daho nodded, watching as a group of young scientists, human, Minamaran, and several other species, demonstrated a new adaptation of their quantum interface technology. And this is just the beginning. Think of what else we might discover now that we're all working together. The celebration continued into the night, but it wasn't just a party. It was a symbol of hope. In every corner of the chamber, beings who once would have considered each other too different to interact were now engaged in animated discussions, sharing ideas and dreams. As the evening drew to a close, Daho and Hannah stood before the massive viewport, watching the stars. Their reflection showed an unusual pair, a human man and a tiny princess on her floating platform. But in their eyes, they saw only each other. "Ready to go home?" Daho asked softly. Hannah smiled up at him. "Home is wherever we're together," she replied. "Size doesn't matter when hearts are the same size." They left the chamber together, heading toward their specially designed quarters on the Minamaran ship. Behind them, they left a galaxy forever changed by their love. A galaxy that had learned that the greatest distances could be bridged by understanding, that the strongest bonds weren't measured in physical dimensions, but in the capacity of hearts to see beyond the surface. As they traveled through space, other ships passed them, massive cruisers and tiny vessels, all using technology that allowed them to communicate and cooperate regardless of their size differences. Each one was a testament to what Daho and Hannah had started. A new dawn for the galaxy, where no being was too small to matter or too different to belong. Their story had become legend, told across the stars, the human scientist and the tiny princess who had shown the galaxy that love truly had no bounds. But for Daho and Hannah, it wasn't about being legends. It was about waking up each day ready to explore new possibilities together, to continue proving that when hearts align, no difference is too great to overcome. The stars streamed past their viewport, each one a possible adventure waiting to be shared. Their love had changed the galaxy, but more importantly, it had changed how beings saw themselves and each other. In the end, that was the greatest achievement of all, a new dawn of understanding that would light the way for generations to come.